So allow me to introduce, I'm so excited about this, by the way, guys. So you know me, I've done these boot camps in the past, which have been like a couple weeks long that have been me focusing on certain topics. What I told Dave is, I was like, we need to shine the light on some of these fantastic thought leaders in our space and in the community. And I was super excited that he was bought into my idea, because he's not always bought into my ideas. But we decided to kick off the Customer Success Thought Leader Summer Webinar Series. So we have people booked for every Tuesday from today through the end of August. The lineup is so impressive. I can't even list everybody out. So every week you're going to see new faces pop up on these slides. We're going to be promoting it on LinkedIn. It's on the site to register, so you'll see kind of who's up next and what content they'll be covering. But I am so honored today to kick off this summer series with Jan Young. And so Jan, why don't I turn this over to you? Let's get you introduced. Tell everybody who you are, where you're joining us from, all that goodness, and then we'll get started on all your fantastic content.
Great. Well, I'm sort of a serial consultant coach. I've been doing this since 2016, under various different labels and things. You probably are familiar with me from the Success League, also doing some things now under JanYoungCX. I used to do a lot of work that was with emerging tech. I've worked in SaaS tech as a project manager, a product manager. I did marketing, sales, account management, but CS is my true love and really what I focus on the most. But I also really focus on go-to-market alignment, because I feel like if we don't have that alignment, we can't move forward together as a company and really help our customers the way we want to. And that's why we build these products, is to help our customers achieve their business goals and to achieve some of our own business goals. And so we're always at that intersection. And that's why I find CS so exciting, because we are at that intersection between the customer and the company. So that's where I like to live.
Well, we are super excited for today's session, and we're so lucky that you love customer success, because then you get to share all of your goodies with us. All right, Jan. So I know that you've got a topic teed up for today. So why don't we introduce what we're going to be chatting about?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about change management. So I will go ahead and share my screen. And let me know that you can see it.
You are golden, Jan.
Great. Let me just bring this over here. So, and so, I'll just start off by saying a lot of what I'm covering today is things we've been talking about in CS office hours. We have a lot of collaborators there. So what you're seeing here today is some of the work that I've built with Ashana Patel and Kishla Caesar Jones. We started off by just declaring June as Change Management Month. It's going to be July too. We're going to just keep running with it. There's so much to talk about in change management. And later today, actually, there's a session where we're talking about best practices in change management, working with our customers. That's David Goldberg going to be helping me with that. The following Tuesday, Devin Lee is going to collaborate with me. We're going to talk about organizational change, when you have a whole executive team that comes in and changes. And then I'll be announcing soon what we're doing in July, but there will be some folks like Seth Dove, if that's how you pronounce his name. I haven't had to pronounce his name, just read it. And then Kyle Yantis and some other folks too. So it's also around like communication and things like that. So we're going to dig into all of that. This is a good overview of kind of what we're doing today.
All right. Well, first, Jan, I'm going to go offline. I'm going to be here, but I'm going to go watch the chat for you. I'm going to go off camera. If you need me to come back on, I'll be here.
Well, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on in the chat, because that's the first thing we're going to have folks doing. So
exciting. All right. Take it away.
Okay. So moving forward, then I want folks to put in the chat, and I need to be able to bring this chat up so I can see it. But let's just see. So what kinds of key activities and skills are needed in CS, whether you're a CS leader or a CSM? What are some of those key activities and skills? Go ahead and put it in the chat to ensure that our customers are successful in reaching their outcomes. Just off the top of your head, it can be one word. You don't have to do your book on it. Empathetic, onboarding, feedback. This is great stuff. Organization follow through, customer centric, Look at all of these things. Yeah, discovery, problem solver, coaching, intellectual curiosity. There are so many things that we're doing when we're working with our customers. So true. Escalation management, absolutely. Now, let's switch to another thing that we're going to be putting some ideas in the chat about. Why do I have shoes and hats on this slide? Any thoughts? Why would I put all of these different shoes? And Christy, no, it's not necessarily your favorite shoes, although maybe those blue ones that are all colorful. Put yourself in their shoes, yeah? Step into the shoes. Are you a shopaholic? Wearing many hats, if the shoe fits, right? Okay, so let me tell you why I put shoes and hats on this slide. First, let's think about the shoes. And I want you, even though I can't see your eyes, I want you to stop and close your eyes for a minute, all right? And I want you to think about what shoes, which of those shoes, what do your customers' shoes look like? I want you to envision them. So close your eyes and think, this is what my customer's shoes look like. Okay, now I want to keep your eyes closed and I want you to imagine that you're taking your shoes off and you're putting your customer's shoes on, and you still have your eyes closed. I have my eyes closed, okay? So now I want you in your mind's eye to stand up and look over, stand over across from you and look over at where you just were. That is your customer's perspective, okay? So I want you to almost physically think about yourself as the customer looking at you, that your customer's perspective, okay? Now you can open your eyes, and when you're thinking about your customer's perspective, your customer's experience, thinking about these hats, what hats are they wearing? Are you doing onboarding with them? Are you doing adoption with them? Are you doing QBRs with them? What else are they doing besides what you are doing with them? What are they doing for the rest of their job? Is this the only product they're using? What are their company goals? Are they hiring people? Are they having to reduce, you know, the number of people on their team? Are there things going on in the company? What's happening in your customers' world? What hats are they wearing? Now, outside of just their job, just like you, they have a life outside their job. What hats do they wear? Do they have kids or parents? Do they volunteer? Did they just move? There are all these different hats that we wear, right? And there's all these different hats your customer is wearing. And I want you to think about that as you think about your customer's perspective and all of the things that they are thinking about and experiencing besides just what you're doing with them, okay? Great. Now, if we're looking at this picture, why would I put this yummy looking cheese, blocks and blocks of cheese on a slide? Any thoughts about that? Who moved my cheese? All right, Liz, perfect. That is exactly what I'm thinking about. Exactly, Andrea. So there was a book decades and decades ago that was first introduced this concept of who moved my cheese, where people, you know, get upset over something that seems really small, right? But it's change. It's this idea that, like, I always put my cheese here in the fridge and someone moved it. This is very upsetting. I always put it here. I know where to look for it, and you moved my cheese, right? I'm a little hungry now too. But that's because change is emotional, right? There's literally, and can you see my cursor as I go and follow this curve?
Yeah,
Let
we
me
can.
know. Good, good. So you can see, like, you think about all these different types of change that we might experience. Now, one that's common these days is layoffs, right? And there's definitely shock and fear and anger when you go through that. But I'll tell you, you can do, it can be change that you want, that you're excited about. You can get married. That's a great thing, right? You can still be a little in shock. You can still have a little bit of anxiety, right? It can still be uncomfortable to make so much change in your life. When you get promoted, that's change that you want. You want to be promoted, but at the same time, you can be fearful. You can have that imposter syndrome. You're like, oh, am I ready for this? Why was I even thinking about it, right? You go through this then valley, right? Where you have this sort of resignation, and then hopefully you come back up from it, right? And as you go through all these different phases, eventually you experience it, and now you have this new normal, right? And what happens is you're actually building the neurons in your brain, the neural pathways, and it takes 40 or 50 times to do something before it starts to feel comfortable. Right? So when you think about the change that your customers are experiencing, they need to try something out 40 or 50 times before they feel comfortable with it. So how many times do they actually use your product and do that particular activity that they're trying to get done in your product before they're going to feel comfortable with it? Are they using it once a week? Okay, so 40 or 50 weeks, maybe a year later is when they're going to feel comfortable doing that activity, doing something that they used to do some other way. Now they're doing it this new way, right? So thinking about that, thinking about the emotion and why it's so important then to help people feel comfortable and secure that you're going to help them. That's Simon Sinek, he talks about your why, right? Change needs a why. Why am I changing? If it's so hard, when you move and you now live in a new neighborhood, we moved 10 miles away, we still had a whole new neighborhood. We had different grocery stores. All of a sudden, you're going to a new grocery store and you have to find mustard. Now you have to think, you have to look. And then there was so much mustard, it took me half an hour to figure out which mustard to get all of a sudden, right? So you have to think it so hard when you're changing, right? It takes a lot of effort compared to when you know where you're going to the grocery store, you know where the mustard is, you know which one you're going to pick it out. You're on automatic. You forget, you get home like, did I drive there? I can't remember. Did I pick up the mustard? You forget, right? Because you're on automatic. When you have those neural pathways built and you're on automatic, you can almost not think about it and get it done. So there's that big difference between when you're going through this change, right? And so thinking back to our customers, we're thinking about the change that they're going through. Let's see. Another thing I'll just mention before moving on is we really, when you think of I should have written it down, but there's the triangle. If anybody has something they want to put in the chat to help me out with this term, but there's like surviving, belonging, and becoming are like the three basic sections. And the first thing we have to do is survive, right? Change threatens that. So first you have to read, yes, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So when you think about, the first thing you need to do is know that you're going to survive, right? And if there's a lot of change happening at work, am I next? Am I going to get laid off? You want to survive. So that changes and disrupts your world, right? Think about that. So then surviving is one. Belonging. We actually all need to belong. And I always like to reference books. And of course, I'm referencing Britt Andreatta. If anybody, I put the link at the very beginning for Britt Andreatta. You should check her out. Wired to Resist is about change, but she also has another one on Wired to Connect, which is about belonging, and Wired to Become, which is a recent one, which is about the meaning that we all search for in our work, right? So when you get to have this hierarchy where you've sort of built on things, then finally it's like, great, now I get to have meaning in what I'm doing, right? But at first, it's like, I just need a job, right? I need a job, so I'm going to go and get that job. Or when you're working with your customer, the change in working with your customer, they need to get things done. So you're going to help them first get things done. Eventually, you're helping them meet their company outcomes, right? And what their goals are and the business outcomes that they need to meet, right? And that's then more of a purpose and a reason, the becoming, right? All of these different things, though, connect to the neurons and the neural pathways. So it's all of these ways in which neuroscience actually reinforces what we're doing across this journey for change. But change then is actually, it's a challenged human biology. When we're experiencing it, and this is sort of a joke on our brain on change. So I don't know, our brain on drugs, never mind. Okay, I'm just gonna laugh to myself because I can only see myself. Thank you, the egg commercial. All right, Christy. All right, so it's literally a physical response, and this makes sense, right? Sometimes your hands sweat, or your palms feel clammy, right? You have endorphins released, right? Your logical thinking sometimes just can shut down when you're feeling fear, like all of a sudden you can't even think straight. Your heart rate increases, you have bronchial tubes enlarge, right? All of these things that happen when you're experiencing change. And change then, successful change, requires that shift in mindset. So if we go back to here, right, you have to shift your mindset as you're trying to go through this in order to successfully end up on the other side where you can get to a new normal, right? And when you think about in CS, what are we doing so often with our customers? We're helping them adopt these tools, right? So that then they can eventually get those customer outcomes. And so adoption is actually learning plus changing. It's not just change on steroids, it's learning. And so I will show you, this is Wired to Grow. This is Britt Andreatta's book, Wired to Grow. And we actually, as a survival mechanism, one of the things we do besides using our opposable thumbs is we actually are wired to learn. That's one of our superpowers, right? That's why we're so successful in this universe, is we are wired to learn. And because we're wired to learn, to grow, that's kind of the easy part. But in order to adopt these products that we're putting out and sharing with our customers, it's not just learning. You can't just say, boom, here's all this stuff, learn it, right? You can't just put that in your customers' face where they're like, okay, I'll learn all of this, right? Because then they have to change what they're doing, whatever they did before, right? When you think about the hats, the hat that your customer might be wearing could be that they were once the champion for the product that was there before it was ripped out, and it might feel to them like it was ripped out and your product was put in. It might feel invasive to them, right? So they're feeling resistance to this change because they have this emotional connection to the other product, to the other company, to those people there, right? So you need to help them become your new champion, right? All of these kinds of things can be happening, could be happening. How do you help them embrace this, your products, and help them see that this is the better way to achieve the outcomes, and it's going to be so much better for them, right? So when you think about that, then adoption is learning plus changing. Some other ways we can think about change is, and I've mentioned this already a little bit before, is, besides it being disruption and that you're eventually getting towards, acclimatizing to it and accepting it, there is that difference between if you desired it or not, and if it was your choice or not, and how that change is introduced, right? Because you think about on LinkedIn, you'll see all of these notices when there's these big layoffs and when CEOs do it like a really, really bad way versus just the difference of it. When a CEO or a company, it introduces the idea of layoffs in a way that's really supportive, right? Like, what is that experience like, right? Or if you think about if change has been introduced at your own company internally, and now you're going to use a different product or there's a new process involved, how is that introduced? Were you a part of that decision-making process? Did you get to have any sort of input, right? So when you think about that, you feel differently. You get on board with something when you feel like you've had a say, when you were able to contribute, when it's part of your purpose and you get to, it's part of that becoming that we're talking about, right? So all of this then, if you think about how do you apply that to your customers? How do you help them if they're going to, sometimes you do train the trainer, right? And sometimes you're going to help that person who's the change agent at your customer's company, help them introduce the change. How do they include people? And if they weren't included, how do you help bring them along, right? These are all the kinds of things that can be challenging in our roles as we're trying to get adoption at our customers' companies. And if you think about these things in advance, it allows you to provide opportunities for people at your customers' companies to become involved. And you can think about that, whether it's in your onboarding process or in the adoption process, or when you're helping them decide if they're going to expand to new products. How do you help them get involved and get everyone on board, the decision makers and the champions and the influencers, right? And so you can think about that. Now, I also mentioned here individual bandwidth and change fatigue. And timing is everything. Because if you had a job promotion at the same time you were moving, at the same time as I don't know, a major thing was happening when you were volunteering for an organization, and then there's all kinds of changes, reorg structure, and maybe your office is moving as well. Like, those are a lot of major changes, right? And there's only so much change that we can take. There's the idea of sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, or, when you have water that's filling up in a glass and then there's that drop that gets it to overflow, right? That happens with change as well. So our bandwidth for change is also impacted. Change for ourselves individually, change for our customers, change within our companies. And when you think about that, it allows you to sort of think about, when might I introduce this change? When is it going to make a difference? And that gets into a change journey as part of your customer's journey. Okay, so if you think about it, and if this also comes from Britt Andreatta's book, and I'll reference some other folks after this too, but I do love Britt. But if you think about it, if there's 4 different types of change, if there is, I want you to take a minute and think about your onboarding process for your product. All right. And if you're not currently working at a company, then think about something you recently, maybe an app you downloaded, or some product or something that you just recently purchased or downloaded. And think about, was it long and intense? Does it take 6 months or 12 months? Right? And a really big project, a lot of people involved, a lot to engage in. Or maybe it only takes about a month or 6 weeks, but there's a lot of effort, right? That would be then this quick hike up a steep hill, so then you have an idea of the duration and the effort involved, right? Or maybe it's something that is long and steady trek. So maybe it's not like a real big effort up front. Like if you were going to install ClientSuccess, right? It's pretty simple as tools go, and you can go ahead and install it. But then in order to use the tool, you have to continue to connect it up to the data. You have to continue to help your CSMs figure out, how to adopt it, how to change their behavior so that they're referring to all of this wealth of information in the platform, right? So that they actually use it for their day-to-day, right? So then that can be a long and steady trek. Now, sometimes what happens with a long and steady trek is people get tired of it. It's just, this is going on forever. I don't know when it's going to end. And then they give up and they're like, enough. And so they're halfway or even 3/4 or even almost the way through. And they'll say, oh, no, that's okay. We're done. I don't know when it's going to end. Right. So that can happen when it's long and steady treks. Or it could be this pebble on a trail. Anybody have an example of a pebble on a trail? What would be sort of like a quick little small change? And is that something that's like your product? Anybody have something recently? Did you download an app perhaps? Anybody want to put it in the chat? I did a progress tracker app too. I'm not sure what AOO is. What is AOO? Oh, it's a biking app. ChatGPT, now that's interesting. You can certainly use ChatGPT pretty quickly, but maybe in order for it to really incorporate and change what you're doing in terms of using it well, maybe that could be more of a long and steady trek. That's interesting, right? One time back when I was working with various founders, there was a founder who asked me like, well, how do you think of onboarding? And so I started to give him an onboarding process. It was like a 30 to 45 day onboarding process. And he went, whoa, 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 whoa. If my customers haven't onboarded in 20 minutes, something's wrong, right? So yeah, Alan, that's another good example. But so if something only takes 20 minutes, then that pebble on the trail, that is your onboarding. Now, it may not be your adoption, but that's certainly your onboarding, right? And so you want to think about it. What does it look like when they're onboarding versus what does it look like when they're adopting? What does it look like if you are going to have them expand or renew? Like, what do these processes look like? How much is involved, right? That's something you can think about there. And you also want to think about then too is I have alignment on this page, and that's because you want to think about that alignment that you have. Both if you're doing a change journey with your customer, or if you're doing something that's a change journey that's internal, working with your teams cross-functionally, right? And what sort of changes are there with any of these processes that you're suggesting? Now, another thing I'll mention though, and this gets back to the slide before when I was talking about bandwidth and change fatigue, right? So if you are in the midst of a very long and intense change and you want to introduce a pebble on the trail, you don't want to introduce it when you're at the very height of this one, right? Because that could then be the straw that broke the camel's back, that little added drop of water in the glass that is now full, right? Because you go drop, drop, drop in a glass, and eventually it fills up, and then eventually it's over. So you want to think about where and when you are doing this change, and can you do it at a time when people will come and say yes and embrace it and come on board with you, versus if it's like, that's too much, I'm done, I quit it all, right? And we've all been there, right? So I want you to think about that too in terms of your own processes and what you're actually suggesting to your customers or what you're doing internally and how much change you're proposing at any time. You can also think then about change agent characteristics and what kinds of characteristics you might be looking for, both within your customers' teams, as well as internally, or roles that you might play. Now, this was something that I thought was sort of fun, is propagator. Who knows what propagator is? I looked this up, but I love this term. Anybody know? Or if you want to Google it real quick. Christy, do you know what propagator is? Oh, like a honeybee. That's a good way of putting it. I like that, Liz. Liz, you're kind of the star over in the chat today, aren't you? So a propagator, the reason why it would be like a honeybee is a propagator is a communicator, but a propagator also sort of germinates the seeds. When you think about a honeybee, the honeybee is pulling together all the honey, but it's also then helping all these flowers become germinated, right? And so when you think about it, then that honeybee is sort of making things happen. So maybe that's a role that you're playing, whether it's internal change or with your customer, right? Or maybe that's something you're looking for in a champion and a change agent within your customer. Yep, someone who's promoting an idea or a change. Absolutely, Ashna. So there's all these different kinds of roles you can play here, whether you're looking for connectors, and connectors are really important if you're an enterprise CSM, right? You're trying to work with all of these connectors, you know, maybe you want to be a connector. I've found back when I was an enterprise CSM, I was introducing people to each other at the companies that were my customers' companies, because they didn't know each other. They have so many different silos going on. I was like, hey, let me introduce you to each other, right? And then there's other times when you want your champion to be a connector, and you know that it's a really good champion because they're introducing you to the people that you need. So it can go both ways, right? Sometimes you're the connector, sometimes they are. All of these different kinds of roles. Oftentimes you need a global visionary. And also, don't worry, I put the link and I will copy it again to all these slides so you'll have them, but there's also a bunch of resources that I have available at the end in the last 2 slides as well. Always do that in CS office hours. Wasn't going to come today without giving you a bunch of resources as well. But anyway, so you can take a look at this article. Yay, Christy. You can take a look at this article and think about all the different kinds of roles you might play or you might need in order to successfully go through whatever sort of change journey that you're working through, whether it's with your customers or internally, right? An experimenter, what I always love about that, having been a Scrum Master, certified Scrum Master, is the idea of, always sort of iterating change, right? It's nothing's ever done. You're always sort of experimenting, doing that sort of A/B, different trials and checking things out. Now, going back to Britt Andreatta, because I can't stay away from her for long. And also, can I just mention, like, these books, they're small. They're, you can check them out. It doesn't matter if they're on neuroscience. She makes it easy to read. And I want to encourage everyone out there to read them. But the 3 types of change management roles she talks about that you need are expedition designers. And that's someone sort of like on this last slide, someone who has that sort of the global visionary, someone who's going to challenge you, right? So an expedition designer, that's someone who identifies the need for change and says, this is the type of change we need, right? So someone who says, hey, we need to have a CS platform and we're going to use ClientSuccess, right? That would be an example of someone who has that visionary, the expedition designer. Then you might have trailblazers. You can think of them as Sherpas. It might be your IT department, someone who's helping to prepare before, during, and after. That also could be the role of a facilitator here, right? Someone who is ensuring that things are sort of going to be ushered through so that everyone can just go and show up and have lunch together while they're talking about this change journey. Right? Who's going to ensure, sometimes it's an event planner, right? And you think about the people who help support this change journey. And then you have guides, people who are coaching through the change, but they're also really responsible for it. It's on them. This might be your champion, someone who is responsible for getting the team to the end. It could also be an executive sponsor. If you aren't connected to your executive sponsor at your customer company, that's somebody who's really key relationship to have, right? Because if they're the decision maker and they've decided that this change is taking place, then you want to be sure that they are providing the why, that they are suggesting to everyone, hey, this is why we're doing this. This is my vision, that sort of global visionary, right? And this is why it's important for everybody to be involved, right? So they might provide some of that as a designer. They might come in at times and guide and coach. And then you might otherwise make certain that you have a champion or an influencer who's going to ensure that the team gets through to the end, right? All right, so coming back to this slide, now that we've been through all of this and we're thinking about change in this way, where we're thinking about, is it too much? When should it be introduced? Do people have the why? Who are the people that I'm partnering with? What role am I taking in this change? Is this external change with my customer? Is it internal change with my company? All of these different things as you're thinking through all of this, right? And you're thinking through the shoes and you're thinking through the hats and you're designing this change journey. I want you again to take a minute and close your eyes and think not just about the change you're trying to put through, but I want you to close your eyes and think about, how is someone else going to experience this change? My customer came to me and wants this change in our product. When I go and I talk to the product team, how are they going to react to it? What else is going on, right? Do you have the why, the business impact from your customer? Can you explain the why and the business impact to your product team, right? Where are they with change? Are they doing major projects right now? And did you just introduce a little pebble that you're like, no big deal. This is a little pebble of a change at a time when they're going through a mountain of change and they're at that pinnacle and that's too much? Or is it something that's at a different time when you're like, hey, just fit this into this sprint, and they can, right? So think about all of those things, all of the different shoes that people are wearing, all the different hats that people are wearing, so that you can think about it from their perspective, so that then you're able to introduce change that's going to be the most successful. All right. Now, these are questions. We always have breakout rooms when we're doing CS office hours. And I don't know that we'll have time to do breakout rooms today, but you can certainly download these slides and take them with you and ask these questions. Yeah, not today, but we can also think about this for a minute ourselves. And I encourage you to continue thinking about this as you take these with you. But I want you to think about, when have you successfully learned and adopted a new product? And why did that go well? Now, one example is in CS office hours, we decided that we would read Atomic Habits, right? So we're doing that for a little a book club, a little side project that we're doing. I've read Atomic Habits before. I've actually adopted some things when I was doing Atomic Habits. That's all about change, right? But the reason why I decided to do that book club again, or to read the book again with this book club, is because we're going to do a social tracker, and that's the most recent app that I've downloaded, and we're keeping each other accountable, right? So one way that you might have an example of a successful change is you tracked it. Another way is you might have done social tracking. How can you incorporate social tracking with your customer when they are onboarding or when they are adopting the product? That might be something that, if it's worked successfully for you, you might be able to help it work successfully for your customer. And if you have some things like that that have actually worked well for you and you want to share in the chat, I'd love to hear it. So anyone think of something that they tried out and worked really well and they want to share with anybody else? Then please put that in the chat. And then while you might be doing that, you can also think about how you incorporate that then for your customers. Do you have some successful customers that you can take a look at what they've done successfully? And can you repeat that and repeat that process? Good, Charles. What was I'll have to take a look at what the actual social, I think it's just a social tracker app. But anyway, if you can look at what your successful customers did, then how can you repeat that for the unsuccessful customers and help them change over to those practices and those steps that the successful customers did? Maybe it was the difference of having a champion. Absolutely, Rahul, an onboarding checklist and corresponding progress tracker. Exactly. Demos can help sometimes, so they can see the why, they can see what the vision is, what the benefit is going to be. Short training videos. Another thing too is if you have sort of a mountain of adoption ahead of somebody, and they are maybe using it once a week, and it's really going to take them a year to do it, maybe that in-app sort of guide that or an easy way for them to get a quick answer on, I need to do X. And if you position it in such a way so that it's like thinking about your customers' jobs to be done, right? And what job they're trying to do. So that might be how they form the question. How can I do X, right? Oh, Felicia, that's great. Data points and milestones. Not only tracking them, but like you just wrote, letting them know that they've reached them, letting them know that they're successful on this journey and where they are, where they're going to be in this journey. Yep, Elizabeth, like a walk me. There's a lot of different things like that that can help and pop up and guide them through it. So it helps them get through it more quickly. And then if they don't need that anymore, then they don't need it. Great, they can turn it off. But if they want it, boom, it's right there back to help them. So really all I have now, besides your questions, so I want to be sure that you have some questions and we can walk through it, is there's a bunch of different resources. I have 2 pages of resources. I think there might be a couple that are repeated, but mostly these are all different things. And this all comes from the first 2 sessions when we were talking about change management this month. And we have Ashna here today. Thank you. We have some people who've been in CS office hours like Felicia and Lisa Day. Excellent. But oh, and if you do want to join CS office hours, the LinkedIn group, then you have the Scan Me group right there. I did a little QR code for it. But what questions do you have? What or examples, I guess, really? Maybe people have been doing these things and you want to share something that's worked well for you. Let's see, Florence, you tried organizing a webinar and invited successful clients to explain their impact, and the unsuccessful ones asked questions and were convinced to try. You know what's so great about that? I love that. But Florence, why that can be so successful is rather than just hearing it from you, the company, they're hearing it from someone that they can envision. I'm like that, and I want to be like that. It makes them aspirational as well, right? Like when you see, that's why when they have people who've lost all the weight show how much weight they used to, what they used to look like versus them what they look like now. It's like, wow, I don't even look as big as that. But wow, look at that body. I want that body. It's aspirational, right? So when you bring in your successful customers into webinars, then your customers say aspirationally, not only do I want to be like that, but I can see that I can do that. Those are great examples. Customer roundtables, sharing use cases. The great thing, Beth, about those customer roundtables and sharing use cases is, first of all, you're uplifting your customers, right? And you get to show them how successful they are. They get to put a feather in their cap. They get to put it on LinkedIn and things like that. I'm a thought leader, right? But then you also get to take those little bits and you can turn them into small use cases, right? You can turn them into ways that you can feature them later in whatever, places that your customer base is. So then they can see, look, we're now promoting not only that this person is a thought leader, but they did it using our product, right? And then they're all connecting. We all like to connect with each other naturally. So now we all belong to a group, right? Where we're all connecting with each other. So roundtables are good that way. Like there's all these different ways, and it's all kind of neuroscience in terms of the ways that we like to connect and belong and feel like we are having an impact. We have purpose, we're becoming, all of those kinds of things. Christy, what's this making you think of?
It's making me think that I got to rethink a lot of things.
Really? I'm surprised.
Well, no. I mean, like, listen, here's the thing. I think the concepts that you presented here, it's like, I think for a lot of us, we probably assumed some of it, not all of it. You definitely presented a lot of depth here, but I think where it becomes a little tricky is in a lot of organizations is just how do you orchestrate this meaningfully, right? Against certain metrics, against certain expectations that are being set, right? Like, I think there's a lot of work as CS leaders we want to do that we are not always afforded the luxury to get it done. And that could be tools, resources, people, process. And so I feel like there's a lot of interesting concepts here that we've got to try to figure out how do you weave that in, understanding what we understand now.
Well, and you know what? I've been guilty of it too. I will go into an organization as a consultant and I'll see all the things that could be fixed. But the problem is if you fix too much, it doesn't stick. You leave and they're like, what was that? Why did we do that? It all sounded so good at the time, right? And so you can't change too much at a time. And if you do change so much at a time, then what happens is, what are you measuring, right? You're measuring the impact of everything. And so then you're not sure what was the key thing that made that difference. And maybe there's something that's actually taking away from the positive benefit and you don't know because you went and did all that change at once, right? And so if you do it incrementally, not only is it more likely to stick, but it is more likely that you can understand if it's something that's really helping or hurting.
Yeah, I think what's interesting here too is how this all impacts our employees as well as our customers.
Yeah.
Because as leaders, where we're deploying new programs and process and technology for ourselves to do the things to make things better for our customers, how are they being impacted by all this change? And how are we doing this in a way that allows them to adopt these new processes?
And that's actually why I'm building out a class that is about how to implement change and how to think about it, one quarter after another in terms of all the people involved, as well as how much change is involved, how much effort is involved, and what the payoff is, both for your customers and your company, right? Because of exactly that, because you can't do all the change at once. That is just too much.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I'm super excited for that. I think one other interesting point that you made, Jen, is when you talked about change happening to people that are not part of the process. And so one of the things that I found really helpful for me with driving change in my teams is that people want to feel like change is happening with them, not to them. And so how can we bring our people along when we're driving and orchestrating change so that they do feel like they're contributing? I felt like the contributors always had a stronger adoption, stronger ability to change than some of the other people that weren't a part of the process.
Yep. Yeah, because they have the why, right? And because it's part of their purpose now, they've gotten on board with it. And so they're like, yes, and it's funny, I was just noticing in the chat to Amy Fletcher asking about keeping the customers and the main stakeholders engaged, right? And that's where I think there's some other folks who had mentioned, showing them what they've achieved, what they've accomplished, right? You also that's why time to first value is so important to show, especially if you have a big, long project, or if adoption is a big, long, adoption project, where you need to show like, hey, these are all the things. Let's break it down into these sections. This is what you're going to get as a benefit. These are the things involved. This is the payoff. This is your why. And then bring them along to different webinars, like the other person was talking about earlier too, right? Show them examples of other customers who were able to get that. Because if you have that example, and that's where I was showing that really long change that goes on forever, you can be really close to the end of it and still be like, I give up. I just can't do it anymore. Right. And it's all of this work you've put in and you can't get to that very end. Well, you're a marathon runner or a half marathon runner.
Let's not go crazy. Yes.
Well, but your husband is also running marathons, right? And it can be really hard. Sometimes you get to mile 24 of 26, right? Or you get to what's half of that, mile 12 of mile 13, right? And you're like, and you're thinking like, I don't know if I can make it.
Well, you know what's so interesting about that, and what I'd be interested to see is like how this translates, Jen, is they always say the mind gives up before the body does.
Yes,
right. So
exactly
if that's the case,
it's
then
the
how do we
pathways.
keep people focused and still in it, right? Like what are those motivators and drivers so that you can keep them engaged and we don't lose them?
Yes. And that's why it's so important to communicate and to show them, to show what they've achieved, accomplished so far, to have those celebrations. If your customer is launching, right, they're not done, but you still need to celebrate that launch. So because they have achieved so much before, right? And so you want to help them think about like these celebrations along the way, and you want to help them think about what their why is and why they should stay engaged and what they can do. You also want to get that feedback from them, because then that helps them feel more engaged and like, oh, this was really hard for me, but now I've given you this feedback and you're going to make this change for someone else. So my big challenge of going through this is still going to benefit someone. I feel good about that, right? There's lots of different ways just by engaging people that you can help them. And no, you can't change everything and make everything perfect ever, or really, all at once, but you can help them along the way. So, you can always make little changes along the way.
I'm reading the chat here.
Yeah, what is this? Any advice in not only working with your customer to change their process, but also having them ask their clients to change how they interact and respond to a new process to view data? Oh, that's like a B2B to C. Yeah. Yep.
Or it could be B2B to B.
Yeah, or B2B to B, sure. Yeah. And so yeah, I mean, the thing is what you want to do then is put yourself in your customer's shoes, so that then help them put them in their customer's shoes, and you want to support them and give them messaging to share and help them with the webinars that they could potentially build for their customers, or whatever it might be that helps them get through that change. Right? How are they going to prepare their customers for change? You help your customer do that, right? And so then they look at you as a hero because you make them the hero. There was someone at once I helped who was a CSM who was writing up her resume, and she was able to say she helped 6 of her customers get promoted, right? And so when you think about that, that's kind of what you're doing. You're helping to, your customer be the hero to their customers. And that's what you want to do.
I love this. Well, listen, I know that we are almost at time, so I will just do a quick check here to see if anybody has any additional questions for Jan before we get ready to wrap. See if there's some comments.
Put these links in here one more time.
Yeah, let's share those links out.
Yeah.
All right. So I know that we're about a minute out, so let's go ahead and wrap up. So Jan, first, I just want to thank you. This has been so enlightening and I think so thoughtful, and it's given us all so much that we can go back and think about and figure out how do we integrate this into how we operate, right? As all operators and leaders. So lots of great content here. So for everyone who attended, thank you so much for carving out time in your day to be a part of this. We will send you the recording. We will send you the presentation so you can take a look at that. Come back next week, next Tuesday. We have another fantastic speaker. Thank you for being a part of this webinar series. Jan, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for asking me. I was so excited to do this with you, Christy. And
yeah, this was like,
don't disappoint.
You really this was definitely not your old CS webinar. Like, let's just put it that way. Like, you brought some new content to the game, and like, refreshing is like an understatement. So
Aw,
thank you
you're
so
so
much for
sweet.
challenging us all to think differently, because I think that's the big thing here is how do we approach this a little differently than we have before.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
guys. Well, thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you here next week.